Hey guys, this is miicrow. It has been a very long time since I've uploaded a video, but I felt like today was a day where we kind of had to upload a video because something kind of crazy happened. That being AGS released a video that is quite possibly probably the most disliked video that they've ever released of all time, and is tone deaf in a lot of ways, but I wanted to kind of talk about it a bit in terms of like what the video is if you guys haven't seen it, but not go through the whole thing in complete depth, and then like kind of talk about what's actually coming in the near future and some other concerns I have for the long-term future of the game and the short-term future of the game as well. So this is an 8-minute video. Approximately, well, when does Katie show up? Basically, there's 3 minutes of talking. The only 3-minute thing that's mentioned here is that there's this new like transmog event thing where they're, which is really cool, by the way. Like, the transmogs in the game is one of the cool high points, and you know there's a competition for who has the coolest skin, which is awesome. Has a gigantic contract that tries to make it so that New World won't get in trouble for a bunch of random things, and then they bring Katie on with this, and unfortunately everything they talked about they basically can't talk about, so they only basically show snips and pieces of what is said after the conversation. During the actual conversation themselves, they just blur out each other's mouths. To see if I can get a spot of this real quick.
I'm super stoked for
Or
that.
we could even
We're
just
still
play
doing
this
all
and
of
then
that
just
right
find a spot
now.
where they do this, for example. But
I'm
it
also
is
super
kind of
excited
wild.
to see any changes that we have.
This is what they did for the entirety of the video, basically. And from this, they mention a little bit of stuff at the end,
I think that like that's really interesting and different.
which is sometimes a little bit more descriptive than that. From that, we can tell what kind of content is coming in the expansion, but oh my god, it is hard to listen to, and the entire comment section seems to agree with that. AGS coming out and like literally announcing this, like, hey, we did not mean to have this kind of reaction. Everyone's like, oh, bruh. It's like, what are you doing? Like, this is like AGS is literally trolling right now. And everyone's like, we're already so done. And then you guys put this out and we can't understand half your video. And they waited extra long for this video too, because there wasn't content. So they're like, you know, we're not going to do a weekly video. We're going to do it every 2 weeks now because there's no content. And then they released this video, which basically has zero content in it. It's like, that was not the point. It's like, if you want to release a video, we want to like actually know things that are like useful for the future. Especially because AGS is like, what this conference talked about, oh, we're so good at communicating with our players. We do this like weekly video, YouTube video thing. The problem is like one video a month is actually something the players care about, and the rest are, well, sometimes cool. Like the mount design video was actually really cool to like hear the designer's like insight for that, and like how he kind of came about like different things, because it was really, really well done. But most of the stuff is just not interesting for most people, and it's something that's like not super relevant to the game's health itself. And then some of this stuff, like, while it's still interesting and it's cool to know about it, sometimes it's just timed poorly. Like in a spot where there's no content, if you talk about what content you have or how you're using recycled content, it's like basically just painful, and no one wants to hear that right now. It is completely unacceptable, and is wild to think that AGS thinks that this is okay. And the other thing that is noteworthy, that is kind of the big elephant in the room, is this current patch that we have right now in this live game. If you look here, you look at Season 5. Season 5 started 90 days ago. It has been out for 40 days, and there were game-breaking bug fixes, or sorry, not bug fixes, game-breaking bugs found within the first week. They came off to a nice start. The first 2 days, they hot fixed stuff, and then they went radio silent. And it turns out all these bugs are being fixed next month on June 4th, in theory. They have given their QA 5 times the amount of normal time so that they hopefully capture all of them in one fix. My rebuttal would be, I want new content to not have any bugs, but if it's something that's already broken, please revert the patch. And if you're not going to revert the patch, please have a rolling fix, because it has been absolutely painful to play PvP, and even in PvE of this game right now, the combat feels so desynced on the current patch compared to last patch that a lot of people have either started warlogging, and I am one of those people that could proudly say they're warlogging right now, and I don't typically warlog for New World. I'm usually an OPR player. I usually play probably an hour to two of OPR every single day. I have played more Overwatch in the last week than I have played New World in the last month. And the combat feels way better in that game than it does in New World right now, I could tell you that much. But it's just been completely painful, and it feels like something that is not getting better. And I am just shocked that they haven't rolled back the patch at this point. Because the patch that we had before this current one was basically the best patch we've ever had in terms of New World, in terms of its like combat and feel to the game, where they added freeform movement that you weren't supposed to be able to turn on, but you could turn on in the PTR, play it on a live game, and then you can get the effects of being able to move your character around, so you're able to like kind of dodge more effects, while the game felt super, super responsive. Instead, right now, there's basic things like you can't do dodge jumping back and forth. We have documented approximately 200 bugs to AGS, and we have made approximately $0 and lost a lot of time from that, from myself and as a community as a whole, and that has been absolutely remarkable in terms of how painful that process has been. But that's happened, and it is just incredible that they have not reverted the patch. I think if this was any other industry, you would revert the patch here and you basically would have a recall. There are so many bugs, it's to the point where you can't easily play the game, and people that have been playing the game since the start of the game have come out are basically quitting right now, or they're just warlogging. For the most part, most of the warloggers are actually thinking about quitting, because the war scene is that bad. Like, it's usually pretty boring at a certain point, but like, oh my god, it got so boring, the meta is so dull so quickly. It's a 30-minute war, and there's approximately 70 kills, and there's 100 players in each war. To give that perspective, that's like, how many people dying is that per minute? That's like, maybe, it's ridiculous. Like, no one dies. Like, the average death in the war at this point is less than 1. Like, no one dies in wars anymore. The assists are so low. Like, the time to kill is just gigantic because healing is incredibly strong, armor is incredibly strong, but no one in terms of the general PvP scene is feeling this at all, because no one has healers even in OPR yet, because we haven't even got like a matchmaker for OPR, which is something that we suspect is going to be coming with this new update, and I wanted to talk about some of that stuff before I continue ranting. I have this like kind of laid out here in terms of what's coming, like what we know, what my suspicions are, and then what's coming in terms of the balance stuff. So the balance stuff I already talked about, that's coming June 4th. That's a month away. I am probably not going to be making many videos in the next month. I might start picking up the pace on like some re-release kind of newer content guides for the very, very suspected and data mined console release that AGS for some reason is not allowed to say at all, even though it has been documented in the PTR files that there is a console release, and we knew about that coming as soon as December of last year. So we knew that like 5 or 6 months ago, and they still won't talk about that at all. We think there's going to be a matchmaker. We can see that on the live right now. If you look at the in-game files, you can see that there's a matchmaker. And we think that they're going to expand that to be from the PvE side of things, which you could also see like if you're just queuing for an activity. Like if I were to queue for an expedition, okay, I've actually never used that screen before, I'm not going to lie. But if I were to go this way and then queue for an expedition, then there's a matchmaker built into this, so I could select a role and then it will figure out where to put me. They're probably going to be taking that concept and applying it to PvP, so 3v3 and arena. I suspect that they're going to add an MMR-based system for that, just so that the games feel more balanced, because right now they are relatively one-sided, as well as not full of people like completely abusing exploits, but it's definitely exploit heavy in terms of people that are mostly using bow. It's known exploits, but they don't want to disable parts of the bow's kit because it would basically disable bow, and disabling an entire weapon is kind of weird and kind of embarrassing because of how buggy it is. Like, they've disabled Phoenix for a while because the bug with Phoenix where you can get out of the map, if you guys didn't know about it, you can get out of the map with Phoenix because you made you invincible and you weren't able to take damage. It turns out you could also use that bug in like OPR and wars, basically any content you wanted, and then you were completely invincible, and that, for obvious reasons, needed to be patched out, because letting people run around being invincible in every single game mode in the game and not being able to die at all is a little bit broken, just a little bit. So that got patched out, which has still not been added back in terms of a hot fix, which is a little crazy to me. But I guess they're really, really banking on that new patch because the 8K plebs that currently play the game are not worth the opportunity cost of the amount of people that they can get from a console release in their eyes. Uh, but we know that there is a new raid coming from this video today, which is kind of cool because they didn't directly say there's a new raid, but they talk about the stand worm, and then they talk about brimstone. It's like, okay, they're talking about the raid. Like, come on. You can put 2 and 2 together there. There's going to be a new raid coming, which is kind of neat. There's a fresh start. The video last week talked about it. Video this week talked about it. The expansion is free. That was mentioned in the video today. So that's going to be kind of nice. If you did not buy Rise of the Angry Earth, though, you're going to have to buy Rise of the Angry Earth to get the expansion. So you can see AGS is trying to tap into that revenue stream where they're trying to get new people to play the game. They buy the expansion, maybe make the base game kind of cheap, and just hope that has enough content to keep people around. We'll see how that game plan turns out, but for the people that are still playing the game, hey, at least they don't have to pay for something new, because this expansion's felt, in terms of Rise of the Angry Earth, has felt a little bit lackluster. There's some things that people just don't know exist and have like never done before. Like, what is this Dance to the Fireflies event? Like, I have seen this, like, I've run by it and I've never done it, and it seems weird, but it exists, I guess. And someone worked on that, and I just feel bad because some marketing dude just completely messed that up. Like, that's someone spent probably like a solid month or two on that, and no one knows it exists. We know that passives of weapons are probably going to carry over from the Balance of Power. They talked about that, and considering this is a big update, I imagine that they're alluding to from that. The Balance of Power guys, by the way, I miss Dave a lot for that because he's felt more relevant to the present. These guys talk about the future a lot, but the nice thing about them talking about the future is they spoil the heck out of everything that's coming. So we know some things that are happening in terms of the weapon balancing too, but the big thing is that passives of weapons are carrying over. So when you have like a traditional weapon that's considered to be an offhand, like a rapier might not have the best passives. Like, okay, if it has critical strikes reduce all cooldowns by 5%, rapier is going to be used in every single thing in the game. But, you know, some of these weapons are not really used typically as an offhand. It might have like a pretty nice passive. Like, you don't see anyone going for like a trapper musket tree, for example, as an offhand or something like that with your artifact musket. And like something like that could be kind of interesting if someone tries to pick it up. Like, you see a lot of ice gauntlets right now. You see a lot of rapiers right now. And a decent amount of hatchets, and those are like your 3 offhands, and everything else is like not really used as much. So it'll be interesting to see if they add some variety there. In terms of suspicions, we already talked about the PvP MMR. I think you just have to have an MMR system if you're gonna do like a roll queue in PvP, because otherwise, like, say that each team has 20 players, right? And that means that, and considering there's 5 people per group, that's 4 groups. Say each group has to have 1 healer. There's a really, really big difference between someone healing in heavy and someone healing in light with like equal gear score. Like, it's 30% from a math perspective, like when you just look at the actual like values, but when you actually look at the math, because of how that compounds and because that 30% is multiplying by everything else, all these other effects, it's closer to like basically twice as much healing coming from light healers compared to heavy healers. And if you're stuck with a heavy healer in OPR, like, oh my gosh, like you are fucked. You will die so often. It's just ridiculous. You need to have something to balance that out, and that's why I think you have to have MMR. The rest of set 2 artifacts are, I'm pretty sure, going to be coming out. For those of people that don't know, in the data mine, there's these set 2 artifacts, and then there's these set 1 artifacts. We've released every single set 1 artifact so far. Artifacts where you've seen 2 of them, like the Great Axe, for example. We've seen the Abyss, and we've seen the one where you can go spinny spin now. That has received 2 artifacts. The ones that we haven't received 2 artifacts, I think, are going to be coming out with this. Like, I'm pretty certain with that, and we'll start seeing set 3 stuff in the data mines once this expansion comes out, and we see stuff on the PTR following that, I imagine. But the rest of set 2 artifacts, I imagine, will come out. They also alluded to this in this video today when they talked about something that we really liked from the current expansion. We're looking to expand upon it. Like, it's probably the artifacts, to be honest. They're likely going to have a revamped zone like they did with Elysian. The thing with the AGS is they don't want to add a new zone because they're trying to get the player base to be more together, because they can't add more players to the servers for like computational reasons. So they're just trying to get people to be closer together. And if they add another region, it's going to spread people out even more. So they're probably going to like turn in Morningdale into something else, I'm guessing, because Morningdale's like the biggest end game zone that's like yet to be touched at all, if that makes sense. Like Windsward, Everfall, Monarchs were overhauled. Weaver's been touched a bit. Brightwood's been touched a little bit. CK, I guess, hasn't been touched either, so that would be maybe a candidate. But It just, to me, it seems like it should be Morningdale. Like Morningdale inherently has like some stuff going on up here as well, like outside the map that we're able to see when you're able to get the invincibility and go outside the map, which isn't like super interesting, but it's kind of cool to see what that area has. And just overall, it's just something that's probably going to be coming in terms of a revamp, considering what they've done in the past. There's likely going to be swimming, not because we need it, but because every player wants it. The part that I want to see with this is I want to see anyone that has armor on just start drowning, personally. If you have light armor on, maybe you could swim. But being realistically here, if someone is swimming in like mithril plate armor, like I am right now, with like the wall tower shield, it's just gonna be comical. Like it just does not make any sense at all. Or there should be some sort of weight metric when it comes to swimming, in my opinion. Somehow there's probably gonna be more bugs, even with the QA 5 times amount of time, because QA, as they've shown in the past, has generally not been able to catch kind of things that seem relatively basic and important to tests. Like I didn't catch, like, this is to be fair to their QA, like I didn't catch like this Phoenix bug either, but I also don't have access to the code base and I don't exactly know how they coded how the Phoenix like works. Like you can kind of figure it out in terms of like what effects are removed when and where, and the mistake that they made before is, hey, if you recall, it basically gets rid of some of the effects and keeps some of the other effects, and then that causes you to go invincible, which should be fixed in the next update, but that's why it's disabled right now. 725 gear score, I imagine they're going to be adding because they need some vertical reset for new players. Vertical reset, I mean, like, you need to have, like, new gear. Oh yeah, there's probably going to be new perks as well. That just naturally makes sense. Like, you have to have a reason for people to grind for new gear. For the new players, you want them to have a gear reset so that they feel like they're not inherently at a disadvantage compared to old players. And then new perks is just something that's just like, hey, this is some sort of incentive for you to get that new gear score. I don't know how they're going to handle artifacts. I really hope that we don't have to go around upgrading every artifact with 725, because we have to do that. I am going to be so done. Like, I do not want to have to upgrade every artifact to 725. Like, rerolling gear at this point, not super expensive, but upgrading the artifacts, like, oh my god, like that will be annoying. And even then, like, rerolling gear is already kind of enough for thing for some people, where it's like, if you release a new expansion and there's not enough content, that some people are just gonna be like, you know, I just don't want to deal with it anymore. Like, it's too much of a hassle for what the end game is worth. That's something I'm a little bit afraid of in terms of New World, in terms of its like long-term longevity, which at this point doesn't really feel like it's existing, to be honest. It feels like anyone that's played the game for the last 2 years is effectively kind of burnt out from what I have been exposed to, and anyone that has not played the game that long thinks it's pretty cool at the beginning. And I think New Worlds is a really good game right now for anyone for the first 500 hours, and then like after that, like, it starts to taper off. But that being said, you know, 500 hours for $40-$60, that's a great investment. Like, that's better than I get for most games. Like, Diablo 4 costs that right out of the box, to be fair. There's a Call of Duty melee skin now that I think costs $80 for Gorilla Kong gloves or something like that. So in terms of like an ROI, like, it's a good value, but it just feels so empty at a certain point. It feels like it could be so much more, and sometimes it still feels like a beta. Like, the fact that the combat still doesn't feel good on this current patch is like ridiculous. Like, it feels like any game that would have had that bad of a combat release, like at a certain point, you just bite the PR bullet and you're like, you know, well, let's just roll it back. Like, it was really good before the expansion. We added nothing with this new update in terms of functionality. Like, it's supposed to be behaving in a better way. We're supposed to be able to get more data from that, but from like a customer basis, it does not feel good. We're going to revamp the whole system anyway, so the data that we're getting right now is irrelevant. Let's just roll back to the old system so that we actually have something that's, like, you know, playable in the current patch, so that we aren't dealing with having to play through 200 plus bugs on the current patch. In terms of like queue swapping and just in general, it just feels more clunky to do basic actions. Like, you can't like, there's a queue system in the game where you can go between weapons and cast abilities, and sometimes it will switch back to the other weapon and cast the wrong ability now, and it didn't used to do that before. Various things like being desynced when you're dodging feels a little bit more common. Breakout rolls feel a little bit harder. Like, the general basics of New World combat, which I want to like kind of revamp and go over in like videos so that people can get exposed to what that combat was like. It just feels relatively weak right now. And Yeah, with that being said, let me know what you guys think. I think this video that put out kind of has the summary of everything in a nutshell. Like every comment is just like super heavy downer on this. Like people are just like shocked that AGS can be this tone deaf, and it feels like in general they're the customer facing side of AGS needs a lot of help, and the development facing side of AGS like is good at times, but like let's be realistic here. A year to put out content is like not really meeting the consumer expectations at this point. The thing with New World that bugs me a lot is this game went from a PvP oriented survival game to a PvP MMO to very clearly a PvE MMO, and there's not been a lot of PvP support, and it feels like when you look all the way back in time, which I know we all love looking at this graph, and I think we lost 2K players, so roughly 20% in the last month or whatever. But you look back at all time, right? Look back like when this game first came out. The thing that was hyped about this game was the combat in terms and the PvP, because it was a MMO that had it had the PvE too, but it was an MMO that had large scale combat in a spot that wasn't seen before, that was not tab target, and had really good feeling combat from its alphas. And it feels like it somehow got worse with recent patches, and like where everyone was talking about like back when this first came out, like look at Shroud, look at Asmon, go look at any of those like big kind of influencer people. It's like, hey, New World has so much potential. The combat feels pretty good. They just need to add the content, and it's like it just doesn't feel like the renewable content's been there, and it's something that AGS has been focusing on, but it's just not been there as of recent. Like you look at what they've done in PvE in terms of expeditions, and it's kind of a joke in my opinion. Like you look at what week is it? Like look at the modifiers here. It's like overgrown. Like you have like all these random modifiers. It's like, okay, that's cool. All these enemies do more damage. It's all nature. So I'm just gonna swap all my gems, and enemies are gonna do no damage. I'm gonna run around and light with 5 con and just be able to do this with my eyes closed and not really have to think about anything. And the fact that you can like basically exploit the combat mechanics, I would call it an exploit at this point, to just cheese the heck out of this. Which, by the way, with this setup, you can currently get above 50% resist by running an amulet to that. In a way that the math works out in terms of how it's calculated, you actually get above the gem cap in these mutations, which makes it even easier. It's like, oh my god, like how is it possible for them to make the content so kind of easy for the PvE endgame for this game compared to other games? Like it's just not rewarding. I think that's where that raid might come in, and the raid might be really interesting and really fun, and I hope it is, because the PvE renewable content's just not been there. You look at things like invasions, and invasions have been a chore since the game has first come out, and they've been touched once. They haven't really been made better. They just basically made the chore sped up faster. It's not like a super interesting like horde mode kind of evolving mechanic thing. It is set in stone where everything will spawn, everyone that does invasions at a high level from these companies has a set script of where every single important mob will spawn at every single exact time for every single map in a game. And the fact that that's been figured out and that it's literally reading off a script at a certain point is just, it's wild. Like you have people able to do these invasions with 25 people. Like as dropouts at a certain point, everyone boycotted our invasions at a certain point, and like all the PvPers had to do the invasion. We were able to hold an invasion with like 25 people. It is not very hard, and it's just because it's all off a script, and it feels like that end game aspect of like what New World is just isn't there. You have things like Wars, which is supposed to be the big end game content. It's completely gatekept from everyone. They refuse to put a company territory limit, which I think would help a lot. Like you look at Chickapeas on this server, or Chicaloa or whatever, and like in my opinion, there should not be a company in the game that has more than 2 territories. Like it should be 2 to 3 max. I don't think it should be 1, but I think it should be 2 to 3 max. And when they start getting to the point where they have 4, like this used to not be a problem because you could double deck. You can't even double deck on people anymore because there's a rotating timer in terms of when the actual influence races pop, because they can't do too many influence races at once because people don't want to consistently do them throughout the day. And because of that system, people were able, and because it's on a set schedule, people were able to game what territories to hold when. Since there's only 3 being pushed per day and there's 12 territories, you can hold a maximum of 4 territories without ever having to deal with a double deck. which is why all these companies that are really, really powerful are going down like, hey, we can have 4 territories, we can make more gold. Other people will have less content in the game, but that's fine with us because we don't really care. Because we don't really care about other people in the game in terms of like people getting better, and that really bothers me. And it's something that like could be very easily fixed by just slapping on a 2 to 3 territory limit, and bam, like all your problems go away. In the past, that was like when it worked because people would make shell companies, but shell companies don't exactly work with the way that they have the territory set up right now. Even though people have like multiple accounts on like the same server in terms of endgame PvP, I'm still pretty sure the most effective way to deal with that would just be doing a company territory limit, and that would kind of make everything a lot easier in order to crack down upon. It's either that or you have to do something like really, really annoying, like preset the timers. Like, I don't even want to think about what you have to do to get around that at this point, because AGS has tried to overcomplicate it for a while, and I feel like at this point, like, I don't really trust AGS to overcomplicate it, and I just want them to be like, hey, maximum 2 to 3 territories. Same thing goes with other companies I'm at, like JDB on West Coast should not have 4 territories. JDB on West Coast has had 4 territories for like 5 to 6 months. There's another side of the coin where it's like, if you can't beat someone that has four territories or 3 to 4 territories, that's a problem. People need to get better. My counter argument to that is, it doesn't matter how good people are if you can't double deck them. Like, you will never be able to catch up to dropouts or something, being realistic from a new company perspective. It's just physically not going to happen unless people like really, really tried in wars for like 6 months to a year straight. Like, that's how big the info gap is, and I've tried to close that in this channel, and I think I've helped in some ways and failed in others, but that's what we've tried to do from the beginning. We've tried to close that information gap, and it does not feel like it's getting any better. If anything, it's getting worse as of recent. And I don't know. That's just something that it feels like AGS just needs to do it well. Sorry, I had to have a drink there. I haven't talked this much in a while, but let me know what you guys think. A lot of, I guess, interesting stuff coming in a month, because we have that, and well, not really in a month. In a month, we have the announcement of what's going on, and then this actual update's going to be probably coming on July 2nd, or a little bit after that, because that's when Season 6 starts. I don't imagine they're going to wait for Season 7, because that's, like, December. And if they release that update in December, the game is going to be, like, dead by the time that happens. So I imagine they're going to release it a bit earlier than that, and probably at the time of a new season, because it just sounds nice from a marketing perspective. And marketing likes to drive a lot of decisions, I imagine. So, but yeah. Let me know if you guys have any other thoughts. I know it's not the most fun topic, but I wanted to put something out there about that video. And I will see you guys later. Peace.